Sometimes the loudest answers don't need words. But when 8-year-old Maya Chen placed her tiny hand on Steve Harvey's chest, the entire Family Feud studio fell into a silence so profound that it changed television history forever. What happened next wasn't scripted, wasn't planned, and certainly wasn't expected. It was the moment when a game show host learned that some voices are heard with the heart, not the ears. The Chen family had traveled from San Francisco to Atlanta with a dream that seemed impossible. Maya Chen, born without the ability to speak, communicated through American Sign Language with a fluency that amazed everyone who met her. Her parents, David and Lynn Chen, had applied for Family Feud, knowing full well the challenges they might face. But Maya had insisted, signing repeatedly, that she wanted to show the world that silence doesn't mean absence. It was a Thursday afternoon taping at the Family Feud studios. The energy was electric, as always, when Steve Harvey took the stage. His navy blue suit was perfectly tailored, his smile infectious, and his confidence unshakable. The Chen family stood at their podium opposite the Rodriguez family from Texas, 5 family members each, ready to compete for the $20,000 grand. During introductions, Steve approached the Chen family with his usual charm. The parents, David and Lynn, spoke clearly about their small restaurant business. Maya's older brother, Kevin, 16, was articulate and funny. Her teenage sister, Sarah, charmed Steve with her quick wit. But when Steve reached Maya, standing at the end of the podium in her bright purple dress and white shoes, something shifted in the studio's atmosphere. "And who do we have here?" Steve asked, kneeling down to Maya's eye level, as he always did with younger contestants. Maya smiled brightly and began signing rapidly, her small hands moving with practiced precision. Steve looked up at her family, slightly confused but maintaining his professional demeanor. "This is Maya," David Chen explained gently. "She's 8 years old, and she communicates through sign language. She's been looking forward to this for months." Steve's expression softened immediately. In 40 years of television, he'd encountered every type of contestant imaginable. But this was new territory. Maya continued signing, her face animated with excitement. "What's she saying?" Steve asked, his voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than discomfort. Kevin stepped forward to translate. "She's saying she's happy to meet you, and that she's been practicing her answers." Maya nodded enthusiastically, then signed something else. Kevin smiled. "She says you're funnier on TV than she expected." The audience laughed, and Steve's trademark grin spread across his face. "Well, tell Maya I said thank you, and that she's already my favorite contestant today." Maya clapped her hands silently, her joy infectious despite the absence of sound. The game progressed normally through the first 2 rounds. The Chen family was competitive, giving solid answers that kept them neck and neck with the Rodriguez family. Steve worked his usual magic, cracking jokes and building energy. But everyone was acutely aware that Maya hadn't participated yet. According to Family Feud rules, every family member had to have a chance to play. During the 3rd round, the inevitable moment arrived. It was Maya's turn to face off against Mrs. Rodriguez for control of the board. The question was simple enough. Name something that makes you feel happy. As Maya approached the buzzer, the studio fell unusually quiet. Even the audience seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Steve stood between the 2 contestants, holding his cards with slightly less confidence than usual. He looked down at Maya, who was barely tall enough to reach the buzzer, and then at Mrs. Rodriguez, a grandmother in her 60s, who was watching Maya with gentle eyes. "All right, ladies," Steve began, his voice softer than normal. "The question is, name something that makes you feel happy." Mrs. Rodriguez won the buzzer and answered, "Spending time with family." It was the #1 answer, and her family celebrated behind her. Now it was Maya's turn for the second part of the face-off. Steve knelt down beside her, bringing the microphone closer. Maya, what makes you feel happy? The studio was completely silent. Maya began signing her answer, her movements deliberate and clear. Kevin started to step forward to translate, but Maya held up her hand, stopping him. Instead, she did something that no one expected. She walked directly to Steve, who was still kneeling, and gently placed her small hand over his heart. Then she took his much larger hand and placed it over her own heart. The contact lasted only a moment, but in that silence, something profound passed between them. Steve's eyes widened slightly. His professional mask slipped just enough to reveal the man underneath. Maya smiled up at him and began signing again, but this time she wasn't signing words. She was signing emotion. Her hands moved in flowing gestures that somehow transcended language, expressing joy, love, and connection in a way that needed no translation. Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. The cameras kept rolling, but Steve Harvey had stopped being a game show host. In that moment, watching this 8-year-old girl communicate with her heart, he understood something that would change him forever. He set down his microphone and his cards right there on the studio floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steve announced, his voice carrying across the studio with unusual gravity, "I need to stop the game for a moment." The audience stirred, confused. The producers in the booth frantically tried to figure out what was happening. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't in any script. Steve turned back to Maya and spoke directly to her, even though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Maya, I don't know sign language, but I think I understand what you just told me." Maya nodded, her eyes bright with tears of happiness. Steve looked at the audience, then at both families. "This little girl just taught me something," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She taught me that happiness isn't something you say, it's something you feel. And sometimes the most important conversations happen without a single word." The audience began to respond, but Steve wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his pocket square, the white fabric he always kept perfectly folded. But instead of using it himself, he handed it to Maya, who had tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of pure joy at being understood. "Maya," Steve said, still speaking directly to her even though she couldn't hear his words, "I want everyone in this studio to know what you just showed me. You showed me that love doesn't need a voice. You showed me that joy speaks its own language. And you showed me that sometimes the most powerful answers come from the heart." Maya began signing again, and this time Kevin translated without being asked. "She's saying thank you for listening to her voice, even though it doesn't make sound." The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front row brought their hands to their hearts. Miss Rodriguez, still standing at her podium, was openly crying. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Steve Harvey stood up slowly and began removing his navy blue jacket. The same jacket he wore for every taping, the one that had become part of his television persona. He knelt back down and wrapped it around Maya's small shoulders. "Maya," he said, his voice now clearly audible throughout the silent studio, "I want you to keep this jacket, and I want you to know that every time you wear it, you remember that your voice is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard, even though it doesn't make a noise." Maya looked up at Steve with wonder. The jacket hung past her knees like a royal robe. She signed something quickly, and Kevin translated with a shaking voice. "She says she loves you too, Mr. Steve." The studio erupted. 300 people rose to their feet in spontaneous applause. But it wasn't typical game show cheering. It was the kind of applause that recognizes something sacred, something real in a world often filled with pretense. The Rodriguez family abandoned their podium and crossed the stage to embrace the Chen family. Mrs. Rodriguez knelt down and hugged Maya like she was her own granddaughter. Steve looked at both families, then at his production team. "You know what we're going to do?" he announced. "We're going to restart this round, but this time, both families are playing together. Every point goes to both families, because today we learned that some competitions are won by everyone." What followed was unlike anything in game show history. Both families played as one team, celebrating every correct answer together. Steve abandoned traditional rules entirely, creating questions designed to showcase each family member's unique strengths. When it was Maya's turn again, Steve asked, "Name something that speaks without words." Maya signed her answer confidently, and Kevin translated, "Love." It wasn't on the board, but Steve looked directly into the camera and said, "That's the #1 answer in my book." The audience exploded in approval. The episode continued with an energy that was both joyful and profound. Every answer the Chen family gave seemed to carry extra weight, not because of the points, but because of the message being sent. When Maya answered another question by signing family for something that never leaves you, Steve's eyes filled with tears again. By the end of the impossible episode, both families had won the maximum prize, but more importantly, Maya had answered 3 questions herself, each response given in sign language and translated by her brother, each one earning thunderous applause from an audience that had learned to listen with their hearts. The moment that defined everything came during the final celebration. As confetti fell and celebration music played, Steve called Maya to center stage. This was usually when he would congratulate the winners, take photos, and wrap the show. Instead, Steve knelt down one more time beside Maya. He spoke to her, knowing she couldn't hear his words but trusting that she would understand his meaning. "Maya, today you taught a television studio and millions of people watching at home that silence isn't empty. Silence is full of love, full of joy, full of everything that matters most." Maya responded by signing something elaborate, her movements graceful and expressive. Kevin translated with tears in his eyes. "She says that everyone has a voice, and everyone deserves to be heard, no matter how they speak." Steve removed his microphone and handed it to Maya. She couldn't use it in the traditional sense, but the gesture was clear. She was being recognized not as a contestant with a disability, but as a communicator with a gift. Maya held the microphone like a treasure, understanding its symbolic meaning. The cameras captured every moment of this unprecedented exchange. Steve Harvey, who had built a career on quick wit and perfect timing, had found something more powerful than words. He had found connection that transcended language, understanding that surpassed sound. As the taping ended and the audience began to file out, something remarkable happened. People approached the Chen family not with pity or curiosity, but with genuine appreciation. Several audience members had learned basic signs during the show just by watching Maya. Others shared their own stories of communication challenges in their families. Subscribe and leave a comment because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. 6 months later, the impact of Maya's episode was still creating ripples. The show received over 75,000 letters and emails from viewers, many from families dealing with communication differences. The episode sparked conversations about inclusion, understanding, and the many ways people can express themselves. Maya became a regular presence in Steve Harvey's life. He began learning sign language, practicing with online tutorials, and eventually hiring a tutor. Every few months, he would send Maya video messages in sign language, his progress improving each time. The jacket that Steve gave Maya became more than a garment. It became a symbol of recognition, of being seen and valued exactly as you are. Maya wore it to school presentations, about deaf culture, to community events, and to her 8th grade graduation, where she gave a speech entirely in sign language that moved her entire school to tears. Steve's decision to learn sign language influenced the entire Family Feud production. The show began incorporating sign language interpreters for special episodes and created a scholarship fund for deaf and hard of hearing students pursuing careers in communication and media. The Chen family's restaurant in San Francisco became a gathering place for the deaf community. They began hosting sign language classes for hearing customers, creating a bridge between deaf and hearing cultures in their neighborhood. Maya often helped teach the children's classes, her confidence and joy inspiring others to embrace their own unique ways of communicating. One year after the episode aired, Steve surprised Maya by appearing at her 9th birthday party, signing "Happy Birthday" with perfect accuracy. The video of that moment, shared by Maya's family, garnered millions of views and showed Steve Harvey's commitment to honoring the connection they had formed. In interviews, Steve often spoke about how Maya changed his perspective on communication and success. "That little girl taught me that listening isn't just about hearing words," he said. "It's about paying attention to what people are really trying to tell you." Maya spoke louder than anyone who's ever been on my show, and she never made a sound. The episode became required viewing in sign language and deaf studies programs across the country. Not because it was perfect representation, but because it showed authentic human connection overcoming communication barriers through empathy and effort. Maya's brother Kevin, inspired by his sister's television experience, decided to pursue a career in sign language interpretation. Her sister Sarah began studying special education. The entire family credited Maya's appearance on Family Feud with opening doors they never knew existed. 2 years later, when Steve Harvey received an award for his contributions to deaf awareness, Maya was his special guest. She signed his introduction, and Steve interpreted her words for the audience. Their partnership had evolved into a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. The microphone that Steve handed Maya that day was later donated to the Smithsonian Institution as part of an exhibit on communication and inclusion in American media. The placard beside it reads, "Sometimes the most powerful voices don't make any sound at all." Steve Harvey often ends his motivational speeches with a reference to Maya's lesson. Don't just listen to what people say, listen to what they're trying to tell you. Sometimes the most important conversations happen in the spaces between words. Maya Chen, now 13 years old, continues to advocate for deaf awareness and inclusion. She still has Steve's jacket, now properly tailored to fit her growing frame, and Steve Harvey still practices sign language. Understanding that learning Maya's language was just as important as her learning to navigate his world. The silent voice that stopped Family Feud that day continues to echo, reminding viewers that communication is about connection, not sound, that understanding transcends language barriers, and that sometimes the most profound moments happen when we stop talking and start truly listening. Because Maya was right, everyone has a voice, and everyone deserves to be heard, no matter how they choose to speak. Love, joy, and understanding need no translation. They speak directly to the heart, in a language that everyone can understand if they're willing to listen. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten, because sometimes a silent voice can teach the world how to truly hear.